What you're seeing now is footage of my actual walkthrough with this client. What we decided on was we were going to clean up a pond bank that was next to his house. There was some brush. There was a couple of dead pine trees we were going to take up. Some overgrown grass we were going to knock down with a string trimmer. Here's the pictures that I sent him once we were done to know that we were all talking about the same thing. As we could compare apples to apples. This was as far left as I was going to go. This was as far right. These are the trees that are staying. These trees I'm not touching. Everything else we're going to take out. So he was happy with the scope of work and the price we quoted. So we scheduled him. It was something like 4 or 5 days out. And then a couple of days after, he sent me this message. I have a question. Can you call me? Now, generally speaking, I prefer text messaging or email just because there's a written record of everything and you can't say, oh, well, that's not what I said. With a phone call, unless you're recording it, which in Florida, I can't without the other person's permission, you don't have the ability to go back and say, well, no, this is actually what was said. See, I talked about that here in this line. The phone call was him asking for his wife about an additional plant that they wanted taken out that was a little bit further down from the boundary. This was my first mistake. Right there, I should have said, I'm sorry, I can't quote anything unless I've seen it. I'll have to go back and take a look. If I would have done that, I wouldn't have made any of these following mistakes. So that was my mistake number one. Instead, what I did was I said, oh yeah, I've got pictures of that from the video footage. I'll figure it out. And this is the best picture I could get. I can't tell what this thing is. So wise businessman that I am, and I'm saying that sarcastically if you can't tell, I went ahead and said, yeah, if it looks like what I think it is, it'd probably be no more than 150, and we'd pull it out. And he said, okay, just, you can let me know when you get there. So I get there tomorrow, and this is my second mistake. I am getting video equipment out. I'm starting my before shots. I'm firing up the drone. My wife is with me, so I'm directing her on what to do. And I'm also communicating with the client. I sent him pictures and said, yeah, this thing is not a bush. It's a full-grown tree, so it's definitely going to be the 150. So I'm distracted. He writes back and says, don't worry, I've already wrote a check. My son can give it to you. Now, in my mind, I'm like, hey, this is awesome. This guy, last time I talked to him and said it was going to be at most 150, he just went ahead and wrote me a check for that full amount. What I quoted him for the cleanup plus the 150. He didn't care what it was. He was like, yeah, 150 is a good deal. You can imagine from the title of this, that is not at all what he meant when he said, don't worry. So I said, sounds good, thank you. To say that I woefully underestimated how much time and effort this tree would take, it would not come close to describing how big I screwed up by quoting this thing from a dumb little low-quality picture out of the corner of my GoPro's eye. That was stupid. It's one of the stupidest things I've done in quite some time. And you know how often I do stupid things, so that's saying something. It only took about 30 minutes to drop the tree, but then it took another couple hours of both myself and Kendall to load it in the trailer, the cutting, the dragging. It was probably 50 or 60 yards to drag it to where the trailer was. So it was, I want to say altogether, it was like 8 man-hours of both myself and Kendall's work. It was terrible. 150 was such a dumb price. Again, that was my biggest mistake. My second mistake was talking with the client while I was distracted. So we finished the work for the day. All we get done is that tree. We don't touch any of the actual work that we were supposed to do first. And I remember this distinctly. I was beaten and defeated, and I was happy I got the tree done, but I was so tired, and I was in line at some restaurant trying to pick some food up for the family because, my wife was way too tired to cook. And I was just done with the whole thing. And that's when I got a text where the client said, hey, I just got home. What's going on? And so in my mind, what I'm thinking he's meaning is, hey, you didn't finish all the work. So I go into this long thing about, yep, I'm so sorry. That tree was, it was a full-grown tree. It wasn't a bush. So all my trailer space, all our time was taking that away. But, we're going to be back in the next few days if the weather allows to finish that work up. And obviously we didn't take payment today since we didn't finish the job. He comes back with, I said, don't worry about the bush. Just do what we talked about originally. I left a check for the proposed amount. This is when what little was left of my world crumbled down around me, standing in line at that stupid Mexican restaurant. You can tell I've got some strong feelings about this. And now we're heading into my third mistake. So he said, don't worry. He did not say, don't worry about it. Ultimately, this is 100% my fault. But I will say, and I'm not saying the client's to blame, but I will say, don't worry and don't worry about it, to me, are two very different statements. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter that he said, don't worry, instead of don't worry about it. But in my rushed, distracted state, when he said, don't worry, to me, I read that as, don't worry how much it costs, just go ahead and do it. If he would have said, don't worry about it, that would have snapped me out of my distraction and I would have said, oh, he doesn't want me to do it. Again, it's still my fault, but that's the big reason why I think I lean towards believing he just wanted the work done and, the money didn't matter, because don't worry, don't worry. That's different than don't worry about it, don't do it. But again, end of the day, it's my fault for not clarifying. That was my second mistake, was not saying, wait a second, do you mean don't worry like do it or don't worry like don't do it? If I would have done that, I wouldn't have ran into any of these issues. My third mistake was the way that I responded. So I'm tired, I'm over it, I'm just wanting to get home and eat some food and lick my wounds, and I shouldn't have replied right at that instant, because the way I sent the text was, that was my fault. I should have clarified. I took your don't worry to mean don't worry about the fact that it was on the higher end. Well, same story. We'll be back to finish it as soon as we can. And I think the way it came across was much more flippant and much less apologetic. My fault. I should have clarified. I took your don't worry to don't worry. Well, same story then. We'll be fine to finish it for the 425. I think if I would have called him and spoken, I might have been able to salvage this job, but I do believe that the tone that I presented in that message was enough that coupled with the misunderstanding, I think he just didn't want to deal anymore with me. Which, I can understand if a contractor made that mistake and then came across like it was my fault, I probably wouldn't be too happy either. So he never wrote back. He saw that as soon as I sent it that evening at 6:30 or whatever, he never responded to me. So I got the feeling that things weren't going to work out anymore, but I decided to give it one more chance. And that morning I said, hey, I apologize again for the confusion. Let me know if you're comfortable with us doing that work. We'll be back to finish it. Obviously, you're not going to have any responsibility for the work we did that wasn't approved. I never specifically said any of that stuff, so maybe he thought I was going to try and show up and still bill him for the old and the new work that he didn't want me to do. Anyways, he saw that immediately after I sent it too, and he did not reply. So I never returned to this client's house. I never finished the original work. He has never reached out and contacted me. I do wish he would have said, don't worry about it, rather than don't worry. Because in those two extra words, that entire meaning, to me, changes. I'm the one as the business owner who should have caught that. So I can wish he would have done something different till the cows come home. But ultimately, I do feel that's my responsibility. So again, 4 or 5 different mistakes that I made at any point that could have prevented this or maybe salvaged this job. But if somebody doesn't want to work with me, I'm not going to cause a fuss. If I've made a mistake, I'm going to take responsibility for that. The only thing that I am happy about is that there is no chance of him being able to sue for destroying a sentimental tree or something like that, because we talked about removing it. His wife wanted it gone. It was just an issue of price, which apparently was too much. And that's an assumption on my part. I could be wrong, and 2 weeks from now I have a lawsuit slapped on my desk. I don't know. But here we sit, August 26th. This is more than a month later. I think all those mistakes I made just left a bad taste in his mouth. He doesn't really know me aside from this interaction, so he doesn't know any of my background or what my intended tone was. So aside from this job just being a huge learning experience for me of, hey, dummy, don't ever do this again, and also making a video that may be entertaining or informative, there wasn't much good that came from it. I remember another thing that had me super frustrated was I was filming with my drone, and it went crazy. Here's the shot where it just started going up into the trees, and before that, it kept shifting position, so I would set up a camera shot and then come back to look, and I'd be like pointed out over the lake or something. I don't know what was going on with it that day, but that was another thing that got me really mad because I almost lost the drone because it flew into a pine tree. Yeah. Again, all of that is my fault. The only thing I can say about the client is I wish he would have been more clear when he typed out that "don't worry," but that doesn't mean he did anything wrong. I'm the guy who's responsible for quoting and running the jobs. It should have been me who said, hey, wait a minute, Mr. Client, that's not clear. What do you mean there? In addition to the 4 or 5 other things I talked about that would have prevented these issues or could have salvaged this job. If you've watched me for any length of time, you know I don't have shame. You know I'm not afraid to say when I mess up, and boy howdy, was this a big one. Learn from it, laugh at it, I don't mind, do one of those. Let me know in the comments times you've had like this as a business owner, things you've learned from experiences like this, or just let me know what a dummy I am. I mean, I already know that, so it's not gonna hurt my feelings, but it's always nice to reinforce what I already believe about myself, and you can play a role in doing that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next one. Oh, just a little tiny tree.